Get up what it is, what it does, what it is, what it isn't. Looking for a better way to get up out of bed instead of getting on the internet and checking a new hit. Me get up, first shot, come strut walking. A little bit of humble, a little bit of cautious. Somewhere between like Rocky and Cosby's for the game. Nope, y'all can't copy yet. Bad moonwalking, and this here is our party. My posse's been on Broadway, and we did it all way. Chrome music, I shed my skin and put my bones into everything I record to it. And yeah, I'm on. Let that stage light go and shine on down. Got that Bob Barker suit game and Plinko in my style. Money, stay on my craft and stick around for those pounds. But I do that to pass the torch and put on for my town. Trust me, on my INDEPENDENT. It's hustling, chasing dreams since I was 14 with the 4-track bustin'. Halfway across that city with the back crush shit. Labels out here, now they can't tell me nothing. We give that to the people, spread it across the country. Labels out here, now they can't tell me nothing. We give it to the people, spread it across the country.
Here we go back, this is the moment, tonight is the night. We'll fight till it's over, so we put our hands up like the ceiling can't hold us. Like the ceiling can't hold us. Here we go back, this is the moment, tonight is the night. We'll fight till it's over, so we put our hands up like the ceiling can't hold us. Like the ceiling can't hold us.
Nah, can I kick it? Thank you, yeah. I'm so damn grateful. I grew up really wanna go fronts, but that's what you get when Wu-Tang raised you. Y'all can't stop me. Go hard like I got an 808 in my heartbeat. And I'm eating at the beat like it gave a little speed to a great white shark on shark week. Raw, time to go off, gone. Deuces goodbye. I got a world to see. And my girl, she wanna see Rome. Caesar make you a believer. Nah, I never ever did it for a throne. That validation comes from giving it back to the people. Now sing this song and it goes like, raise those hands, this is our party. We came here to live life like nobody was watching. I got my city right behind me. If I fall, they got me. Learn from that failure, gain humility, and then we keep marching.
Can we go back? This is the moment. Tonight is the night. We'll fight till it's over. So we put our hands up like the ceiling can't hold us. Like the ceiling can't hold us. Go back. This is the moment. Tonight is the night. We'll fight till it's over. So we put our hands up like the ceiling can't hold us. Like the ceiling can't hold us.
So we put our hands up. So we put our hands up.
Let's go. And all my people say, that's right. And all my people say, and all my people say,
Can we go back? This is the moment. Tonight is the night. We'll fight till it's over. So we put our hands up like the ceiling can't hold us. Like the ceiling can't hold us. Go back. This is the moment. Tonight is the night. We'll fight till it's over. So we put our hands up like the ceiling can't hold us.
Hello and welcome to the inaugural All Vote No Play Engaged Athlete All-Star Meeting. My name is Lisa K. Solomon, and I could not be more excited to be your host for tonight. We have almost 2,000 participants joining us from around the country. Athletes, coaches, mentors, educators, parents, teachers, youth sports, and more. It's an extraordinary reminder of the power of athletes and sports to bring us together on behalf of a greater purpose. I am so proud to be a part of the All Vote No Play Leadership Initiative. It's just been an extraordinary journey to be working along such incredible athletes and coaches that care deeply about empowering all student athletes to become better teammates, engaged citizens, and informed voters. It's just extraordinary to be part of this effort that really flexes our civic muscles and power in new ways. Now, when we planned this, we could have never imagined that we would be doing this the day after the Emmy Awards, where our nation's favorite coach, Ted Lasso, brought home 4 more Emmys. Who doesn't love a coach that makes his players and teammates better? And in doing so, makes the community thrive. It's extraordinary that at the heart of Ted Lasso is the mindset of belief, the mindset that we can all create a better future together by pooling our individual talents in extraordinary ways. At Stanford, I teach a class called Inventing the Future. And at the heart of the class is the belief that the mindsets and practices and skill sets required for all of us to shape a better future, to shape the kinds of communities and teams we want to be a part of, are teachable and learnable with intentional practice. And it turns out that athletes are amazing at practice. And they know, and we know, that you cannot get better at the things that you don't practice. The belief that the future is not up to others, but is instead up to us, is a stance of civic power and possibility. And that is exactly what we are going to be exploring tonight. Now, I am not alone in thinking about that. So I want to welcome all of you with this incredible message by Senator Cory Booker, former student athlete, Stanford player from the class of '91. And I'd like us all to think about what Cory Booker has to say about what athletes can bring to our future and our country.
Hey, this is Cory Booker, and I'm excited about All Vote, No Play. And I guess I'm excited just because I know the power of athletics to transform a life. I am literally a United States Senator standing on the foundation of the kind of grit and teamwork and leadership, all the lessons and wisdom that I learned, not to mention the opportunities that athleticism opened up for me. But I also know I'm here because athletes have understood the power of their activism. From Muhammad Ali to Billie Jean King, we know that some of the greatest advancements for justice in America have been made by athletes over the years who understood that they had the potential to be artists of activism, to make this nation live up to its promise. Whether you realize it or not, as an athlete, you have a great impact and influence amongst peers and young people and others. And this is a time to use it, because democracy is not a spectator sport. It is a full participation endeavor that demands everybody get on the field. And you know that, we know that as athletes. And so I encourage you to set that example, to inspire folks, in many ways to look at this point in our nation's history as the truth, that the game is on the line. The promise of our democracy is always on the line. The cherished freedoms and privileges are not promised. We have to work for them. And if you have the great privilege of being an athlete in this great nation, we should use that. It's not a burden, but a responsibility, an opportunity to pass on to the next generation and pass on to others what has been given to us, this extraordinary nation with abundant opportunity that has allowed us in our lives to flourish. Thanks, everybody. Good luck, and get out there and vote.
Amazing. We're so grateful to Senator Booker for being so supportive of this movement, for expressing an opportunity that we all have to put our power and platform to work on behalf of our future, that democracy is not a spectator sport. That really resonates with me as an educator, as a coach, as a civic entrepreneur, and yes, as a former student athlete. I know what it's like to work and persevere every day to try to be better. And so much of what we're trying to do is to show that there's more available to us beyond our sport to make our societies and our communities better. We have an unbelievable lineup for you tonight of all-stars, the all-stars of all-stars, the GOATs and the greats of civic leadership and sports, to help share their story, their motivation in conversation with student athletes. We really wanted to get personal, and we wanted to make it relevant to each and every person watching, that you don't necessarily have to lead a protest or a march to express your civic power, that the way we show up as teammates for each other every day are things that we can learn from, that we can make that choice. And I cannot wait for what's about to unfold. I think it's also important as we get started to share a little bit about the history of all vote, no play. Some of you may have been like, I'm down for the engaged athlete part, but what about that no play part? I'm not sure I'm there for that. And I wanted to just share the origin story because I think it embodies everything that this movement is about. In June of 2020, Coach Eric Revenot, there on the right, was trying to support his team, then at the time at Georgia Tech, where he was the associate head coach of the basketball team, to help them understand what was happening in the moments following the murder of George Floyd, the dynamic social activism, the protests, the marches, the pain that we were feeling about how we were going to move forward as a country. And in one of his team meetings, one of the seniors on the team, Malachi Rice, asked his teammates about their plans for the future and specifically asked them if any of them were registered to vote. To Coach Revenot's surprise and perhaps a little dismay, nobody raised their hand. And after 25 years of coaching, the realization that as perhaps one of the most important adults in these young people's lives, that he missed an opportunity to talk about becoming engaged citizens as part of becoming an engaged athlete, a developed athlete. A few days later, Coach Rev took to the Twitter sphere, as some of you follow Rev might know, and planted a call to action. And he said, on election day, we as coaches should not practice or play. We should instead make time to vote. Hashtag all vote, no play. Within days, the movement went viral. Over 1,100 coaches signed a pledge that they would not practice or play on election day. That's tens of thousands of student athletes. Shortly after, the leadership committee of the NCAA proposed a legislation to make election day a day off from practice and play, to instead become a day on for civic engagement, an annual event. And that persists to this day. And what's exciting is that just this year, some of you may know that the NBA made a similar announcement for this year. So this is not just a moment in time. This is a movement. And we are doing it through the energy of athletes. We recently started an Engaged Athlete series trying to highlight the diversity of ways that athletes were stepping up for their communities. Whether it's Hannah Lisiak from Northwestern's volleyball team, who spent her summer preparing the Big Ten to get engaged in the midterms, or Ryan Belk, a tight end from Yale, a Parkland survivor who became passionate about gun violence and is using that passion to engage the entire Bulldog athletic community to create a voter registration drive. Or Chase Griffin, who we're going to hear from later today, who not only helped run the 2020 Bruins votes, but is using some of the percentage of his NIL endorsements to support local communities and other student athletes. Each and every one of these engaged athletes are stepping up beyond their sport. And our hope is that this is not just a limited series, that the engaged athlete mindset reaches the more than 500,000 athletes around the country, not to mention high schools, as well as youth sports. This is the opportunity that is ahead of us. I want to say, before we get into the conversations tonight, that this event is extraordinary on another reason. And that is because of the coalition of partners that have come together to support this. This isn't just any single organization. This is a system-wide effort to try to reimagine how to support student athletes in flexing their leadership and civic skills. We have the Pac-12 using their muscle and their long history of supporting athletes to engage beyond their sport, combined with iCivics, the largest provider of civics education for K-12 educators around the country. We have Athletes Unlimited, a mind-blowing professional sports league that we're going to hear about later, that from its DNA supports its athletes to give back to their communities, along with incredible civics organizations like vote.org, Motivote, a tech platform that uses behavioral science to help us vote. All in campus democracy challenge, students learn, students vote, my vote, and many, many others that have been behind it. This alone is groundbreaking. Additionally, we have over 900 athletes that are watching tonight's event through team watch parties being sponsored by Pizza to the Polls. I wish we could have like a fan cam or a team cam on all of you so that we could get pictures of Michigan State, of Davis, of Holy Cross, of BU, of so many others that are coming together to realize that democracy is something that can build community and that we can bond over pizza and purpose. And we're so grateful to Pizza to the Polls, which is just an extraordinary organization reimagining civic joy. So I'm just so excited that all of this is happening because of the energy of student athletes and all of you. I think we're ready to get this all-star meeting started. And I could not be more thrilled that our All Vote No Play student lead, Sam Veskin, is here to kick off the first conversation with Dr. Condoleezza Rice. And Sam, before I turn it over to you, I just have to say how much you embody the spirit of everything we have done. You are not only the former captain of the Stanford men's basketball team, you are also the Pac-12 Scholar Athlete of the Year, winning many awards for your citizenship and your leadership. And I just couldn't be more thrilled to share with this whole group that this gathering was really your vision. And I'm thrilled to have you kick us off. So Sam, thank you so much and welcome.
Well, thank you so much, Lisa. And I can't be more grateful for your vision, your belief, and your leadership in this effort. To kick things off, I'm pleased to introduce our first guest of the evening, former Secretary of State and current director of Stanford's Hoover Institution, Condoleezza Rice. From 2005 to 2009, Dr. Rice served as the 66th US Secretary of State, only the second woman and the first Black woman to hold the post. At the time of her appointment, she was the highest ranking woman official in the history of the United States. Yes, according to Forbes, that made her the most powerful woman in the world. Born in Birmingham, Alabama, Secretary Rice then moved west, earning her master's, her bachelor's, and PhD in political science from the University of Denver, University of Notre Dame, and back to the University of Denver, respectively. Aside from serving at the highest levels of government, Secretary Rice has been heavily involved in the sports world since her childhood, where she grew up the daughter of a football coach. More recently, in 2013, she was appointed to the College Football Playoff Selection Committee, serving until 2017. Now she has moved over to the NFL as part owner of the Denver Broncos. Welcome, Secretary Rice.
Thank you so much, Sam. It's great to be with you and all the wonderful student athletes who are listening in today.
Awesome. Well, we'll dive in. For my first question, I'm interested in hearing about the parallels between your career in public service and the sports industry, and if there's any crossover in what leads to success in either field.
Well, I also was an athlete growing up. I was a competitive figure skater, and I think that you take from your athletic experience so much with you into the world. And when I think about my life in public service, I had learned a lot of lessons. Number one, you have to keep going even if things aren't always going your way. You have to persevere. You have to be able to have a not great performance and get up the next day and keep going. Even though I was in an individual sport, I always valued those times when we played as a team, and we did go as a team to competitive to competitions. And in public service, you have to be a part of a great team. It's actually not the case that there's any, quote, leader who does it all. The best thing that a leader can do is to see leadership capabilities in other people and to bring them to the fore. And I think, Sam, you know, as having captained the Stanford basketball team, that that's an awful lot of what you do. You're really trying to bring other people to leadership roles. And probably most importantly, I think that you have to have a certain optimism in public service that you also have to have in your sport. if you go out onto the field or to the rink or whatever it is, thinking, well, I have no chance here, you are going to lose. You've lost before you have even stepped on the court. Well, in public service, you have to have a kind of optimism about what's possible. And so I think that my training as an athlete, I think my time in the sports world really crossed over very much to what it was like to be in public service. That and really having a sense of mission every day.
That's amazing. And that sense of optimism you talked about, that reminds me of the belief that Lisa just talked about before. And really, I can't echo what you said enough. Shifting gears a little bit, I will ask you next a question about your book, that Democracy, Stories from the Long Roads to Freedom, where you share the following quote: "There is no more thrilling moment than when people finally seize their rights and their liberty. That moment is necessary, right, and inevitable. It is also terrifying, disruptive, and chaotic." Can you talk about your experiences, not only in public office where you saw this take place, but also in your childhood growing up during the civil rights era in Birmingham, Alabama?
When you think about it, Sam, I think there is no human being, man, woman, or child, who wants to live in tyranny. If you ask people, do you want to be able to choose those who are going to govern you, say what you think, worship as you please, be free from the knock of the secret police at night, that's a universal human set of desires. And I will now say, fortunate to grow up in segregated Birmingham, Alabama, where that couldn't be taken for granted. And so I watched as my parents my father talked about how he had trouble registering to vote the first time that he tried to vote. In fact, he tells the story, he and my mother were not yet married, but they were dating, and they went down to register to vote. My mother was very beautiful, and the poll tester asked her, "So what do you teach?" And she said, "I teach American history." She taught English, but she told him American history. He said, "So you probably know who the first president of the United States was?" And she said, "Yes, George Washington." He said, "You pass." And then he looked at my big football player father, 6'3", huge man, and said, "How many beans are in this jar?" And there were thousands of beans in a jar. And my father said, "I don't know." He said, "Then you fail." My dad went back and he found out that if he could find a clerk who he could tell he was a Republican, she might register him, because everybody was trying to get people registered in the party. And so he got registered. But I never forgot that when I watched people searching to be able to vote around the world, something that we take too much for granted. Do you know how people in places like Iraq, or in places like even in Afghanistan, or around the world, South Africa, where people would line up for hours upon hours upon hours just to be able to cast that vote and to say, I made my voice heard? And so when I hear that there are Americans who say, well, my vote doesn't matter, or I'm not going to vote, or I'm too busy to vote, I say to myself, can you imagine what people will sacrifice to do what the only thing you have to do is go and register and stand there and vote. And they will face down terrorists in order to be able to do what it's so easy for you to do. And so my experience at home in Alabama, but also my experience abroad as Secretary of State, has just, it's what Cory Booker, Stanford grad, said, democracy is not a spectator sport. And somehow people who are striving for it, who don't yet have those freedoms, understand it better than those of us who have those freedoms.
That's amazing. And thank you for sharing those personal stories. I'm sure that's tough to share, but that does lead me into the next question, which is, we've seen that as any other country, America has its shortcomings and democracy does not always function perfectly. But just like you just shared, I believe there's still a lot to be proud of as an American citizen, and we've made a ton of progress as a nation. How do you reconcile those two ideas? And for student athletes across the country, you just touched on this, but why is it important to care about democracy?
Well, it's important to care about democracy because if you don't like what's going on and you don't participate in democracy, then don't criticize. If you haven't taken your chance to have your voice heard, then don't say, woe is me, things are not going the way that I want. democracy requires active participation to try and bring about change. And I look back and I think of how much change there has been in our country. When I was a little girl in segregated Birmingham, my parents and I couldn't go to a movie theater. We couldn't go to a restaurant. I've already talked about how my father had trouble voting. I think about the fact that for so many, just the simple act of being able to go and vote was denied. And I'll tell you a little story about how much change there has been. It's a little vignette that sticks in my mind. So I was sworn in as Secretary of State in 2005. I was sworn in front of a portrait of Benjamin Franklin in the Franklin Room of the State Department. I was sworn in by a Jewish woman, Supreme Court Justice named Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who was my neighbor at the Watergate apartments. And I remember thinking, Sam, and looking kind of at the portrait of Ben Franklin and thinking, what would old Ben have thought of this? And I thought, of course he would never have imagined it. And frankly, I wouldn't have imagined it as a little girl growing up in segregated Birmingham. I'm sure Ruth wouldn't have imagined it when she was just trying to have her voice heard in law school. But we both kept pushing and the society kept changing, and that moment could take place. And so when I hear people say nothing has changed, I think, are you kidding me? And so if you say nothing has changed or nothing can change, you really do devalue the experiences and the efforts of generations and generations of Americans who have fought for change, who have protested for change, who have voted for change, and who've made change happen. And there are so many ways that Americans can make change happen. I often say, and Sam, my students ask me all the time, well, how do I get involved? Go work in a campaign. Find somebody that you believe in and work in the campaign. Go and help at a Boys and Girls Club, because a lot of what we do has to do with civic society, helping each other, experience democracy. And in doing so, you will be following in the footsteps of all of those great patriots who made change over a very, very long period of time.
That's just absolutely incredible. And, what you talked about in terms of striving for progress and recognizing the progress we've made and not aiming for perfection. That is the epitome of a student athlete mindset. I'm never going to be a perfect jump shooter. I'm never going to be Steph Curry, who I think we just saw come on the call. But I can continue to progress every day. And that's exactly what we've done as a nation.
Yes.
Just a couple more questions. Given the student athlete audience, I'm sure we have a lot of aspiring leaders tuned in this evening. You touched on this in the first question, but you have been a leader at the highest level. What lessons do you have about leadership you want these student athletes to know?
Well, one that I think all of you, particularly those of you who've been parts of teams, to be a great leader, you have to have the trust of the people that you're leading. You have to have an integrity, because if you ever lose people's sense of trust, you can't lead. And so never do anything that is going to erode people's trust in you. And I'll just say to your generation in particular, be very careful in that regard about what you put on social media, because it lasts for a very, very long time, and it can, at just the wrong moment, erode that trust. A second important lesson that I think you have from leadership is, as I said, you have to recognize that you're finding leadership characteristics in others. And your job as a leader is to facilitate others being able to do their job, not just to storm out there and say, follow me, but to help other people play their role. Finally, you have to have vision and optimism. We talked about optimism. Pessimists never changed anything. And nobody wants to follow a sourpuss. So have a sense of optimism, not rose-colored glasses, but a sense that we can get this done. And that you've also learned as an athlete. If you don't believe as an athlete, you're never going to get it done. So believe as a leader and transfer that sense of believing to the people that are working with you. And it's amazing the great things that you can achieve. And I just want to give one more example, Sam. Maybe the greatest leader that I ever met was Nelson Mandela. And I had the chance to meet him when I worked in the White House. And the reason he was the greatest leader was that He had this extraordinary ability to see the world as it should be, not as it was. So imagine somebody who's in jail for 27 years. And when he finally comes out, he doesn't say, now that Blacks are in power, we're going to oppress whites like they oppressed us. He says, no, we're going to build a multi-ethnic South Africa where all South Africans can live together. That's vision, that's leadership, that's courage. And I think it's what makes ultimately a great leader.
That is truly phenomenal. Thank you so much for sharing those amazing anecdotes about Nelson Mandela and your experience from your childhood and all the way to the White House. And just one last fun question to wrap things up. If there's one fun fact to know, not about Secretary Condoleezza Rice, but about the person Condoleezza Rice, what is it?
Oh, the fun fact. Well, you all know that I'm a sports fanatic, so that's not actually a fact that's not known. I love to cook. There's a fun fact.
Favorite meal to make?
Well, I'm a Southern girl, so my favorite meal to make is fried chicken.
That's great. Well, thank you so much, Secretary Rice. You have been absolutely phenomenal. This conversation is something I'll hold with me for a long time, and just what a privilege it has truly been to learn from you.
Well, thank you, Sam, and thank you to all of you, Lisa, and all of you for this extraordinary effort. It will make our democracy better, and that's because you'll all play an important role in it. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And I'm now excited to transition to the next segment of our evening. To introduce our next speaker, I'm honored to bring on Coach Jesse Pruitt, current assistant men's basketball coach at Stanford University. Welcome, Coach Pruitt. Take it away.
Sam, thank you very much. It's great to see so many engaged student athletes. As Sam said, my name is Jesse Pruitt. I'm an assistant men's basketball coach at Stanford University. I have the honor of introducing Issa Silva and Stephen Curry. Issa is entering his second year with the Stanford men's basketball team. As a freshman, Issa shot 50% from the three-point line. He's also been part of several community efforts helping local families and students in his hometown of Sacramento. Stephen Curry's accolades speak for themselves. Besides being the greatest shooter in NBA history, he is the co-founder of the Stephen and Aisha Curry Eat, Learn, Play Foundation, an Academy Award-winning producer, author of a beautiful children's book titled I Have a Superpower, and most recently, a college graduate. So without further ado, Issa Silva and Stephen Curry.
Thank you, Coach Prue. I'll see you tomorrow at practice. Before we get into the greatest, in my opinion, player of all time, but we can argue about that later with other people. I want to thank Sam and Professor Solomon for having us. I haven't got a chance to meet Professor Solomon, in the flesh, but from what Sam tells me, she's an amazing person and has inspired him a lot. So knowing Sam and him being probably the hardest worker I've ever encountered on my basketball journey, I just know they're both amazing people. But just want to say thank you to Stephen Curry for being here. I always knew as a kid I'd meet you. I didn't know how, seeing you from afar, but I just want to thank you for inspiring me and inspiring a bunch of other, hoopers who have big dreams and have the backbone of faith. So thank you for that. And thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, my man. And hello to everybody on the call.
For sure. Well, I'm sure everyone's as anxious as I am to ask these questions. So I'll start us off. In your 13 seasons in the NBA and 4 NBA championship seasons, what have you learned is the most critical trait it takes to being a good leader on a championship level team?
Well, first, I was listening to a little bit of Secretary Condoleezza Rice's remarks and whatnot. Tough act to follow, but very, very inspiring and appreciative of her perspective. And, speaking on leadership and being active and thoughtful around, where you show up, how you use your voice, how you use your platform, the conviction around what you stand behind and all those type of things. It all goes into, being a true leader and being somebody that can be counted on in the best of times and the worst of times. And, my experiences through the NBA and on and off the court in the last 13 years have taught me a lot about, what it takes to be, consistent in your effort with, not just what you say, but how you live your life, the core values that you stand for, that, we all want to get in front of a group and say, this is, 1, 2, 3, 4, the values that I stand behind, but can you really, nobody's perfect, but can you live that out on a daily basis and bring your best self that not only, tests you, but lifts others around you, in the sense of pursuing like a shared goal or mission. But also I think for me, it's just been being authentic to who I am. Like, there are plenty of ways to go about leading a group, whether it's being, vocal, demonstrative, leading by example, all the different categories, but being authentic to who you are has been something that's carried me throughout, these 13 years, because I've truly believed in running my own race and not comparing myself to, to the person to the left and to the right, and understanding that I am where I am, for a purpose and for a reason, and identifying ways to relate to everybody that I know is a part of a group that's gonna, help everybody be successful and succeed. And, I've learned from some great leaders in my own right, coaches, mentors that have kind of shown me the way, and you find that voice for yourself. So, being authentic to yourself is huge. And then understanding that the seasons of life are important to kind of recognize, because every year for me has been a different challenge, whether it was you were, trying to reach the mountaintop for the first time, whether it was you're trying to maintain your team culture and your organizational culture through success and through failure, whether it was, dealing with a change in our roster and, personnel that was coming into the fray. You have to continue to analyze, your situation that you're in, and be accountable to what that is, and be thoughtful to what that is, because every year is different. And for me, that's been a huge part of trying to sustain this for the amount of years that we've been going. And even now thinking about, okay, we can do this again next year. So it's just constant evaluation, being authentic to yourself, and learning from, amazing leaders and influencers around you that you connect and relate to.
No, thank you. I mean, I'd say, to share a little bit, like for me being a freshman last year, learning how to be a leader, I think it helps to have people around you who are really good at, living within themselves, but also, reaching out to other people. And I think when I see good leaders or great leaders who I like to study or watch, including yourself, it's about, remaining true to those core values. And now to go into the next question, it's kind of more about leadership in the democracy world, in the world of democracy. The NBA recently announced that they will not be holding any games on Election Day, November 8th, 2022, to encourage players and fans to go vote. Throughout your career, you have been vocal about utilizing your right to vote and stand up for voting rights, saying, quote, "I'm not just on the Golden State Warriors, but I'm on Team Democracy." What makes you so passionate about this topic?
It's just realizing that we all come from somewhere and represent a family, a community. The platform that you have, even, when I was at Davis in college, 1,800 students, a mid-major in the Southern Conference at the time, they're now in the A-10. You always knew, like, people could resonate with how you carry yourself, the joy that you bring to, the craft that you work at tirelessly every single day. That's an opportunity to share who you are and share what you believe in and leverage that platform for good and be able to change things and be a voice for people that can't, speak for themselves. And I didn't know it at the time when I was at Davidson, when I was 18 to 21 years old, or when I got drafted, like this would be the life and the opportunity that I had. But you never forget where you come from once, and you always know, like, basketball and the gifts that you have and the skill set that you have, you've been given for a reason. And if you can influence somebody, just one person, through that gift, then you're doing something great with your life. And as that platform has increased exponentially, I've carried that inspiration and that mission behind it. And so when you talk about being active when it comes to voting rights, when it comes to human rights, and the ability to say, okay, basketball has done so much for me in terms of developing a skill set, developing a character, developing a work ethic, and provided so many amazing life experiences. Now I have the opportunity to say, okay, I can be a part of a group that's changing the narrative of what it means to be an active athlete, and encourage people to vote, to be passionate about, issues that are near and dear to them, to look out for communities that need, resources and programs to be catered to them. And that little bit of action matters. Is always a trickle down effect across the board. And so whether you realize it in the moment or not, it all matters. And so even when we look at the NBA, during the pandemic season in the bubble, we had an opportunity as a group to leverage that platform to open up arenas across the country as registration sites for voting for the 2020 election. And then you think about now, like you said, with the NBA coming to the forefront as taking a stand on saying, okay, we're not going to have games on election day. We want you to get out and vote and not have any distractions or anything in your way to say, I'm going to exercise my right to vote. That's a great kind of North Star narrative. And then you trickle down and say, okay, what is that actually going to do? What is that actually going to mean in terms of changing, communities and influencing issues that matter? So basketball is my expression of my gift, and everybody has that. And now, the NBA is kind of taking the lead from the players. And I'm happy to be a part of that group that's understanding it's not just about putting that ball in the basket. It's about what can that actually mean for the communities that we've all come from.
Right. No, that's great. And I think as you speak about, like, being that voice and more voices coming up in basketball, I think it might make it easier to facilitate, that the message and the messaging we want to get across to get athletes and people with platforms gets more active in that right. Is there any role model that you've had in that department that's really just helped you fine tune your leadership?
I've had a lot throughout my years, like from Coach Bob McKillop at Davidson, in terms of shaping not just the athlete, but the human being, to Mark Jackson, my head coach with the Golden State Warriors at the time, who kind of allowed me to unlock the power of my voice, to Steve Kerr, who now has given me such a perspective on, how blessed we are as athletes to do what we do on a daily basis, but to not shy away from some of the hard conversations, from some of the issues that will have historically divided us, but hopefully will turn to kind of unite us in terms of understanding we're all going through, certain things in life. And we can kind of galvanize around just togetherness and love and a spirit of unity. I hate to name drop, but I've gotten to rub shoulders a little bit with the 44th President Barack Obama, who I never thought I'd have anything in common with, but has kind of demonstrated what it means to be unashamed of who you are and what you want to speak about, and the influences of that he is as a father first and foremost, and every other role that he plays in life as a philanthropist, as an activist, obviously a president. But it's it's special to see kind of the courage that he exudes every single day, and then also Stacey Abrams, who I've just gotten to meet over the last 2 or 3 years. Hopefully the potential next governor of Georgia, but somebody who has taken her life story and translated that into a strong, or the strongest platform of, encouraging voting rights for everybody across the board, not just in her state, but across the country. So from a coaching perspective, a politician perspective, I've had a lot of amazing influences, and I'm sure that will continue, because I'm very open to, and I'm very curious about, the great leaders and great influencers that are, in our society today that we all can learn from.
Oh, that's great. I think when we talk about voting, it's something that's spread really well amongst, sports. More and more, it's improving. But I think just being a good person and giving back to the community is also something that I admire about people, and that I think everyone on the call admires about you. And I was born in Berkeley. I was born in Berkeley, California. Grew up in Sacramento until I got to Stanford last year. But maybe talk a little bit more about Eat, Learn, and Play, and maybe if you could share like a powerful experience you've had while connecting with people in the Bay Area.
Yeah, me and my wife Aisha's organization, Eat, Learn, and Play, has been around since July of 2019, and 99% of our work is dedicated to Oakland and the greater Bay Area, around those 3 pillars of being the village for our next generation, to provide the basic resources and necessities that they need to achieve their fullest potential. Obviously eat and healthy, nutritious meals, and access to those programs, learn and helping them continue their education, and really focusing on sorry if you hear my kids in the background, early childhood literacy, and understanding that from birth to 3rd grade, to get kids to proper reading levels by 3rd grade, that dictates a lot of their future success in college and high school completion, and college participation. And then the play element in terms of creating safe places for kids to go enjoy sports, enjoy, the camaraderie of, their counterparts, be around coaches that are equipped to service them, equipment and programming as well. So that's what we're about. That's what we're doing. And between the pandemic and our food distribution programs that have now distributed meals to over 19 million meals across, Oakland and the greater Bay Area, to planting, we call them little libraries, but making reading and literacy fun for, especially kindergarten and 3rd grade reading levels, and giving them age and culturally relevant books for them to read, and planting these little libraries that you can go up and just take a free book, bring it back if you want to. And we continue to load them with over, I think, 300,000 books this year across Oakland, refurbishing playgrounds and things like that. So it's a well-rounded effort of reaching the community where they are, reaching kids where they are, understanding that they feel, or making them feel loved, making them feel seen, cared for, and also providing programs for their families, because we're dealing with generations of trauma and systems that have not been designed to support the communities that we're going after. And so we're excited about the opportunity. We're 3 years in and continue to grow. We have amazing community partners that we're not trying to reinvent the wheel, but we're trying to continue to amplify the need and the resources that need to go into these communities. And when you talk to certain families and teachers and kids that they see our Eat, Learn, Play bus pull up, and there's fresh produce and fresh books for them to participate in and take home and understand that that we're here to help them, that those interactions mean the most, and they continue to inspire the work that we're doing. And very grateful that the community that has supported me and my family for the last 13 years, that we are in a position to be able to give back. So that's what Eat, Learn, Play is all about, and it's a life's mission and a life's work. And so to know the impact that we've had, in these short 3 years, it means a lot.
Not being in the Bay anymore, I'm sure the whole community just really appreciates the support, and I think for a lot of people who want to give back, that's the dream, is to one day be able to do something like that. So that's amazing. 2 more questions, 2 more little lengthier questions, and a couple fun questions. I think talking to student athletes, we have a lot of student athletes across the country here today. How do you have any suggestions or pieces of advice that maybe we can take in terms of doing something little, especially just balancing with school and sports? Like, what are some little things that we can do, that can hopefully grow into something bigger in the long run?
I think each of you could answer like what you're passionate about and what area you want to influence, and to not be afraid to say, okay, you're balancing 2 full-time jobs in terms of being a student athlete. Like, you want to excel in the classroom and you want to excel on the court, and we all know what that takes to accomplish. But that's why I always go back to that, just saying run your own race, in terms of, if you have the ability to stretch yourself a little bit and say, okay, I'm committed to, supporting an organization that is already existing, that, you've made a connection with, and you say, I'm going to volunteer an hour, or I'm going to go, speak to this kid who I know can benefit from just, a sense of encouragement, or, whatever the case is, whatever the opportunity is. If you impact one life, you're doing something great. So don't feel like, when I talk about 19 million meals, that didn't happen overnight. That was something that was built on a consistent effort of trying to find some way to influence the community around me. I grew up in North Carolina. I used to volunteer at an after-school program across the street from Davidson called the Ada Jenkins Center. And I know one kid hopefully was influenced by something I said, or some, moment that I was present in their world and made an influence. Those series of events have now escalated to what Eat, Learn, Play is. And so you have to start somewhere. You have to be active. And even if you don't get that return right away, that instant gratification of, oh, this action led to this, like, don't be deflated by that, or don't feel like you have to have everything figured out. Just be active and be present, and be curious about ways that you can take, something that's passionate or near and dear to you, or something that you want to impact and influence, and just start small and continue to build from there. Because I know in our generation now, everybody sees the polished product of what social media tells you is, and what the narratives of these amazing organizations that seem like they just popped up overnight. That's not how it happened. So as student athletes now, you have an ability to influence, and you can do it in a very meaningful way, even if it's one person that you affect.
So thank you, Stefan. I am being cut off, so I would be here all day if I could. So thank you. But I have 3 fun questions, super quick. Then we can go along. What's your favorite city to visit on the road?
Probably New York City. Madison Square Garden's nice.
Yeah, it's a good place to play at, I'm sure. Favorite musical artist?
Ooh, of all time, Lupe Fiasco.
Got you. All right. Now, since I think a lot of people are joining and having pizza parties across America, so this one's kind of on cue. Favorite place to go get pizza?
Oh, that's such a great question. Probably. It was one right down the street from my house. It's called Amzini. I love it. It's top. It's go-to every single day.
There you go. Well, I
Yeah,
appreciate you. Thank you so much, Stefan. Hopefully I get to see you soon, and I think we all appreciate you. So thank you.
absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everybody on here. Thank you, Issa, and the entire Stanford community. I appreciate it.
Stefan, Eason, thank you so much. The whole idea of changing the narrative of what it means to be an active and engaged athlete, Stefan, I think you do that every day, and I really appreciate it. I'm sure all the athletes did, that you talked about starting small, that really shrinking the change, and those habits build, and that if you can just change one other person, you're making a difference. And that's so much of what we are doing today. I will say, as a futurist, when I saw the NBA make the decision to turn the arenas into voting places, to me, that was one of the most extraordinary decisions I'd ever seen in terms of helping communities do something that had never been done before, right? Pandemic had never done before. And yet this massive national election to turn them into safe polling places. And not only that, to couple that with something you said around the narrative, around a commitment to changing how we talk about what's possible, to change our stories, the media and the partners that you've helped build, so that it's not just a single time, but it's really carrying forward. Thank you so much. I will also want to say that when you had a conversation with your family in 2020 about the kind of leader you were looking for in the president, it mirrored the exact class I was teaching at the time called Designing the President. And I was screaming at the top of my lungs because it can be so intimidating to look at this ballot and figure out, I don't know what these positions are. I don't know what I care about. But if you pause and you say, you are a hiring manager and you get to pick the kind of leader that you want representing your community, it changes everything. And you demonstrated with your wife that it's possible to have those conversations at the earliest ages. So thank you so much. And the last thing I will say is I'm going to make everybody jealous.
Hey, there we go.
It's now going to be required reading. I have a superpower. We could have renamed this whole event. I have a superpower. And I love that at the end of the day, the superpower is Hugh's heart. So I just want to say this is the most gorgeous book. I'm going to be making sure all of my students read it. I don't care what age. Stefan, thank you so much for all that you do, for how you show up every day. You really embody what this is all about. And we are so, so grateful.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'm taking that energy with me. Thank you very much.
Well, we are thrilled. Well, speaking of hearts, oh my gosh, we have 2 more all-stars with incredible hearts that are going to join us right now. We have the incredible Cameron Brink from the Stanford women's basketball team, who's not only part of the 2021 NCAA winning team, but she last year was named Pac-12 Media Athlete of the Year, Pac-12 Defensive Athlete of the Year, in part because if you know anything about watching Cameron Brink on the basketball court, you know that her 6'4" frame is basically a block machine. So it is so, so fun to watch Cameron Brink in action. And I am thrilled that she is going to be in conversation with like the all-star of all-star, the GOATs of GOATs, Coach Tara VanDerveer, who is one of the most winning coaches, I think the most winning coach in NCAA history, over 1,100 career wins, has been at Stanford for 37 years, which makes me very happy. I hope there's maybe not 37 more, but many, many more, coached the Olympic team, and has long believed that coaches and athletes can have an impact beyond their sport. And I'm so excited to invite them here to talk about not only Coach VanDerveer's career and how she thinks about building a team as a sisterhood, but all of the choices Coach VanDerveer has made to literally imagine new ways, for example, to support humanitarian aid to Ukraine during a war. So we're going to learn about March Madness. We're going to learn about all kinds of exciting things that Coach VanDerveer is doing to build sisterhood and community in the team. But before I invite them on, I just really want to again suggest that this is not one and done, right? They don't just do it. Just last night, Cameron Brink was honored at the stadium, the Giants Stadium, for her courage and how she has spoken out about mental health. And there she is just last night, really being a role model for so many. And just this past weekend, Coach VanDerveer was inducted into the Stanford Hall of Fame, just one of many, many accolades honoring Coach VanDerveer and 9 other women athletes in support and celebration of Title IX and what's to come. So please join me in welcoming Cameron Brink and Coach VanDerveer onto the screen.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for the introduction. And Sam for letting me be a part of this. So yeah, this is really exciting. Hey, Coach, how you doing?
Hi, Cam.
Good to see you. So I'm going to start us right off with our first question, okay? So during the 2022 NCAA tournament, you pledged to give $10 for every 3-point basket made to humanitarian efforts in Ukraine. Your commitments inspired hundreds, including Charles Barkley, Brianna Stewart, and even your mom, Rita, eventually raising $330,000. So this shows the power an individual can have. Prior to this, did you believe that the chain of events would occur, and what were your takeaways?
Well, Cam, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you, Sam, for inviting me. And it's great to be on a panel with Dr. Condoleezza Rice and Dr. Stephen Curry, the shot doctor. And they're just tremendous examples of giving back. And I think that what happened with when I saw what was happening in Ukraine, having coached the USA team in Ukraine and knowing the women, and we played against them like 15 times getting ready for the 1996 Olympics. We call them our cousins. I just thought we have to do something. And so I did pledge $10. I ended up actually donating $20 per 3-point shot because we didn't make as many threes as I thought we should. But it was, I think it was, you know, as one person can make a difference, and so many people contributed. I got help from so many people to make it work. And I think as student athletes on this call, you know, you can make a difference. There are things that you can do that can make a difference, and to challenge yourself to do those things.
Yeah, I remember being interviewed in a post game, like after a game, and the reporters asked, I think, me and Lexi if we were more motivated to make 3-pointers. And we were like, yeah, we definitely want to make Tara pay as much money as she can. So,
Thank
but
you.
yeah, we were really proud of what you did, and thought it was just a really, you know, shows your true character. So yeah.
Thank you, Cam.
Yeah. Next question I have for you. So at your initial high school, there were no sports teams for girls. Flash forward to 2022 and the 50th anniversary of Title IX, and women's sports are growing faster and stronger than ever because of leaders like you. There is still a long way to go, but can you share some of your experiences in the fight for equality and what you've learned so far?
Well, Cam, it was really painful not to have not to have the opportunities to play on teams. You know, I loved basketball. We did 3-player weave in gym class, and I was crazy about it from the 3rd grade on. But the boys had like a 5th grade team, a 6th grade team, 7th, 8th, freshman, junior varsity, and girls had nothing. And it was really hard. And I also think that, you know, it was, I wonder why my 10-year-old self didn't fight harder for it, but I didn't know to. And that even makes me madder. But obviously now things are so different. The opportunities for women are so much better. We still have a ways to go, but we need you know, people like Steph and dads with daughters and moms to fight for rights for women and rights for girls so that they have the opportunities to play and to get the things that I didn't, but you did. And you're making the most of it, which is great.
Yeah, I mean, Title IX has affected all of us in so many ways, but my life a lot because my mom wouldn't have met my dad in college. So she went to Virginia Tech and wouldn't have gotten an athletic scholarship if Title IX weren't a thing. So I wouldn't be here without it. So very thankful for it.
I am too, Cam.
Yeah. Kind of shifting gears a bit. So I'd like to know what your assessment is of NIL or like NIL changes and how they're going to impact student athletes' ability to have more of a platform for impact.
Well, I think NIL is something that has been a long time coming. And I think when it's viewed in its purest form, I think it's a great thing when you as a student athlete or any male or female student athlete has ownership of your name, image, and likeness and your ability and your opportunities to monetize that. I think that it becomes a problem if that becomes the focus of a student athlete. If they're spending so much time, whether it's on social media or doing interviews or doing photo shoots or whatever, and it takes away from your academics and it takes away from your sport, then I think that would be unfortunate. I also think that it has the potential to, some people are giving money back through NIL, which I think is great. But I also think it has the potential to divide teams. If you and I are on the same team and, you are, maybe being very successful in NIL and I'm not, maybe that has the potential to divide. So hopefully we can grow and learn and have people benefit in a good way from NIL, which I think was the reason that it initially was passed.
Yeah, 100%. I think what makes me laugh is when it first started to become a thing. I remember talking to you about it and you were super adamant about telling me to not be on TikTok too much. You were like getting them TikTokers and everything. So you would definitely really guided me in the right direction, because it's a really, new experience for a lot of student athletes. But ultimately, I'm really thankful for it because I think it's, especially given women's basketball players, a lot of, more influence and everything like that. But definitely thankful for your guidance surrounding it.
Great. And you did very well with it too.
Thanks. Shifting gears again. So not only have you led Stanford to 3 NCAA championships, which I was lucky enough to be part of one of them, but you've also led the U.S. national team and Olympic team to multiple gold medals. So can you describe what it felt like to represent your country on the international stage?
Cam, I know you've played internationally and maybe a lot of the student athletes on this call have also, but it's something really special when you hear your anthem, when you come out and you're, when you're sometimes in a foreign country, you just really appreciate the wonderful country we are from. When that plane lands and, maybe I've been in Russia or China for 2 weeks, everyone on the plane is cheering. We have such a wonderful country. Now, is it perfect? No, but that's kind of what the point of this call is to be more active, to be more engaged socially and community wise. But more than anything, I experienced a tremendous amount of pride being an American.
I definitely, like you said, I was on a junior national team and I was lucky enough to go to places like Thailand, Japan, even Belarus. And I definitely felt like the honor that came with it, but also wanting to represent our country in a good light. So yeah, you've done some really amazing things.
You'll be on more teams.
I hope so. Okay, I have a couple of fun questions for you. The first one being, I want you to talk more about like your favorite hobbies. I definitely want you to talk about water skiing because you're really good at it. And I think people would be interested in hearing about it.
Well, I think one of the things, as a coach, I need to get away just like our players need to get away. And one of the things I do in the summer is water ski. And During the pandemic, obviously we didn't have any basketball camps. We didn't have any recruiting. I water skied 90 days. I love it. There's a freeness being out on the water, and sometimes you just have to get away, and that's my getaway and my go-to, my happy place.
You're really good. I remember I was tubing the other day. I was on a friend's boat and I was tubing, and I sent Tara a video of me on the tube, and she was like, "Hold on, don't fall off." And I was like, "Okay, Tara, I'm not as good as you on, with water sports." So yeah, you're really good at it, and it's really fun.
Thanks, Cam. I love it.
Yeah, you're really good. Last question. I just want to know what you're most excited for this upcoming season, because it's right around the corner.
Well, we do start in 2 days. What brings me, I think, the most pleasure and the most joy, it happened actually during last year's season, is just when you can just feel this great camaraderie with your team. You have a great game, you have a great practice. I through several situations have learned to enjoy the day. Like today is a great day. I have an opportunity to meet so many people on Zoom. Obviously, my friends, Steph Curry and Dr. Condoleezza Rice being on here, they've both been in our locker room, and just be inspired by the people that I meet. So this year for me, I just want to take it one day at a time. We have a great team, so much coming back, and so many young people that I'm so excited to get to know, and to encourage our team to do what Cory Booker said, and what both Steph and Condoleezza do: give back. We give back through how hard we play and how hard we practice with the fans and inspire, but also give back to our communities. We are so fortunate, and to always be grateful every day.
Well, yeah, Tara, I just want to thank you for being my biggest role model, and just for being such a great, inspiration for many. So thank you. See you Thursday practice, and I'm going to turn it back to Lisa.
Great. Thank you, Cam.
Cameron.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you so much, Cameron, Coach VanDerveer. I want to say that it's obvious that you prioritize giving back. I mean, just in the way that you play. I have said on social media, no one's taken me up on it yet, but I want to introduce another stat, which is the stat of reaching out your hand to pick up an opponent after they have fallen. And I have to believe that the Stanford women's basketball team is leading that stat. The number of times I have seen your players after a, really tough moment, just pause and say, okay, I'm going to get you back up. So it is extraordinary. You model it in all that you do. And in fact, last year, I was so inspired by watching your team that we decided to host an impromptu watch party where I teach at the Stanford D School for your Final Four. We basically ordered about 1,000 bags of Cheetos and welcomed anyone around to see the team play on the big screen. It was really a thrill. And it was a chance for us to celebrate you, and just so grateful for all that you do for your players, for our community, and really modeling what's possible going forward. So Cameron, Coach VanDerveer, thank you so much for being here and all that you do. And we are excited to cheer you on, definitely. So good luck in the upcoming season. I am so thrilled right now to transition to really a groundbreaking leader in the spirit of engaged athletes, who is not just an athlete herself, but is really part of a whole new business model, a whole new way of thinking about how athletics can change societies. So in a moment, I'm going to invite my friend and inspiration, Cassidy Lichtman, who is a USA volleyball player who now plays for an incredible professional organization called Athletes Unlimited. But probably best for you to hear first what Cassidy has to say about what they are doing.
The thought that keeps running through my head is, look at this thing we built.
Last summer, we were sitting on our couches watching the men play.
At the beginning of this, I asked you, why do you play?
And it makes me think about the women who came before us, who never had this. And thank you all for buying in. Just really humbled and honored to be amongst all of you.
Such a strong group of women who are role models who have taken this sport to the next level.
If you had asked me to imagine what professional volleyball could look like in the United States, in my wildest dreams, I could not have described this.
Space to be free, to be supported, to be heard and valued. And with that said, representation is extremely important. Being a Black and Puerto Rican woman who is also part of the LGBTQ plus community. It is extremely important to be up here and be a role model for a younger generation. So
continue to play so that people below you have the opportunity to do this and have their life change the way we all did.
Because the question has never been, are we good enough? Are we interesting enough? Are we valuable enough? The question has always been, will you invest in us? Will you make space for us? Will you allow us the opportunities to be the heroes of our own stories? To be the heroes in the eyes of the next generation coming up? Because we're ready. We have been ready. I hope that there comes a time that none of us are playing here. I hope there's a future version of this league that is filled with women who are living out the dream that we planted this last 5 weeks. And that we can come back and look in that book and see our names and see all of the names that came after us and say, look at this thing we built.
Oh my gosh, I get chills every time I see it. Every time I see it, Cassie, I've probably seen it a dozen times and I get chills. Please join me as we get to talk a little bit, Cassie, about you and the work you're doing at Athletes Unlimited. And I just want to share a bit of a picture so people can have it in their mind as we talk about what this last season was like for you. But first, can you just describe Athletes Unlimited? I mean, it's really unlike anything I have ever heard before. And again, it just gives me so much hope for the future.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different aspects of Athletes Unlimited that are interesting. So we're a network of women's professional leagues. There are 4 leagues right now in volleyball, basketball, softball, and lacrosse. We play 5-week seasons. We have no set teams, no owners, no general managers. Our players are captains and they redraft their teams each week. And there's sort of an individual leaderboard and a really innovative kind of scoring system. But on the kind of back side of the league, the players are given this kind of unprecedented amount of power in the decision-making processes around all of the things that affect us and our athletes in our league. And so each of our sports has a player executive committee made up of 5 athletes from their league who are working kind of with staff collaboratively, not negotiating, but really on the same side of the table to kind of weigh in on all aspects of the league. Which kind of has redefined for me what it means to have kind of a voice and power as an athlete. And there's an entire kind of focus also around civic leadership, which, you saw the picture just then. We have a campaign called Power My Voice, which I think we'll get into. But it's really kind of core to the values of the league to empower athletes in their voices in whatever ways they want to use them.
When I first learned about it, I actually wrote a book about designing business models and my head exploded because the way that it's thought really disrupts every notion we had about how professional sports athletes work. And first of all, and I really hope that some of the student athletes have just like rocked, you were very casual about the fact that there is a professional softball league, there is a professional lacrosse league, there is a professional volleyball league. Those 3 did not exist in the US before Athletes Unlimited. And basketball, which does exist with the WNBA, but the way it's played. And that alone should just perk these student athletes' ears up. Like, wait a minute, I can get paid to play beyond my sport. There's a league for me. So that is so exciting. And I know, just picking up on what you said about the organization structure, from the beginning, you have this commitment to civic leadership. I know there's actually a leadership role on civic leadership. Can you talk a little bit about the cause campaign that is built into the model and the big milestone that you just hit this summer?
Yeah, so totally agree on everything you said. So all of our athletes are paid, which is amazing. And unfortunately for our sports, revolutionary, in the US at least. We haven't had opportunities on American soil, at least in my lifetime, which is crazy. But we're all paid a base salary. And then we also get a bonus based on how we finish in the league. And then the league matches on top of that half of our bonus, and they'll give it to the cause of our choice. So every athlete in every one of our leagues picks a cause that they care about, that they want to contribute to at the end of the season. And so this past summer during our lacrosse and softball leagues, we passed $1 million over essentially 2 years. And I think that's amazing, just for the sum of money and the fact that it's going to great causes, but also that it's going to causes that these athletes have chosen, that they've used their voice to say, this is what we care about. And one of the reasons that they started this program from the very beginning was that as female athletes, we rarely have the kind of money necessary to contribute large sums to charities. So many of the male athletes, like, Steph Curry talked about his foundation, which is fantastic. There are very few female athletes who reach a point where they can contribute those kinds of sums of money. And so, for us to have, it's the largest amount that most of our athletes have ever been able to give to something they care about.
It's incredible. I mean, $1 million in just 2 years distributed among all these athletes as part of how they are doing their sport. I mean, that's going to change the trajectory of how they think about connecting and leading and investing in communities for years to come. It's really amazing. All right, Cassie, I got one more question for you, which is to talk specifically about the volleyball season that just happened this past year in March. And again, when I first learned about it, I was so impressed with the holistic way that you thought about, as a leadership team, making choices to not just allow your team to play and play safely, but to lift up the community that you were really serving at that time. So I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about this past second season for you.
Yeah, so we played our first season in Dallas in 2021, and we were preparing to return for our second season when the Texas state legislature passed a whole slate of controversial laws, banning certain topics from being taught in school, some things around voter suppression, abortion access. And so we had a moment, I chair the player executive committee, and we had a moment where we had to discuss, do we want to return? Or do we want to boycott? What's going to be the most effective thing for us? What's going to be safe for our athletes? We're a women's sports league. Like, we need to make sure that our athletes have access to medical care if necessary. There were laws around allowing access to guns without a permit. We had to know if we could ban guns from our venue. And so we talked about it, and obviously there were people with really strong feelings. And one of the things that was important to us was, I had read Stacey Abrams' op-ed in after the Major League Baseball left Georgia for the All-Star game. They decided to boycott Georgia, I think also around voter suppression issues, unfortunately. And, in her op-ed, she essentially had said, boycotts can be great. They can also hurt the very people that you're trying to help. All of the small businesses that are making money off of, the game being there, et cetera. And so it was really important to us to get some input from the people who were actually on the ground, actually doing the work in Dallas, in Texas. So we connected with some of the groups down there and ended up deciding that we could actually do more by staying than leaving. And so in our case, boycotting was not going to be as effective. So we ended up going there, and we formed kind of a whole working group around, with athletes from all of our sports and our staff, around what are we going to do when we show up? How do we use our voices in that space in a way that's effective? And I think what was cool about what we ended up with was, rather than come in protest and kind of anger around these laws, and there was plenty of anger to go around, we decided to come in celebration of our values. And so we created kind of space in our arena for the things that mattered to us and things that we cared about. And so we had a bookstore with books that had been chosen from our athletes that were all by, authors with marginalized voices. And we had a wall dedicated to women from history who had inspired our athletes, and a voter registration booth at all of our matches. And so that arena became not only, a space that we played in, but the celebration of everything that we cared about. And some of which was in opposition, to those laws that have been passed, but kind of really in a positive way. And so to see that kind of come into fruition, and to be sitting there signing autographs and then watching little girls walk up to a wall and read about Ida B. Wells or 180 Craft or all of these women who had fought segregation and had created Title IX and all of that. I think for me, to do that in the middle of Texas in that moment and to bring these women there, that was super impactful.
Oh my gosh, it's incredible story. I mean, just that whole reframe, we actually teach that in our class. You just gave everyone a little cliff note. And one of the things we do in Inventing the Future is we challenge assumptions. How do we turn a constraint into an opportunity? What if, right? So the obvious, or maybe the one what was right in front of you, was to boycott, but instead you were inspired to say, you know what, how do we turn this into an opportunity? And I just wanted to pull up again this fabulous partnership that you brokered with vote.org. And I know you're doing an event coming up in a couple of weeks that's continuing to go, to say, look, Texas just passed voter restriction laws. what can we do with our power and our platform and what we do have control over to actually support more people registering? And this idea of, again, in a state that is passing book banning laws, how do we have control over our merchandise shop to make sure we are selling the books about the stories we care about? So Cassie, I just want to say thank you so much. I hope everybody reads your story. We're going to be sending it out as some of the resources that we're going to give folks after this. I want to say I'm the proud owner of some of your merch, Power of My Voice. I love that the arrow is to the my, and I really hope that teams really look at what you're doing as inspiration. How can we use what's available to us to further the values that we care about? And so Cassie, keep doing what you're doing. I know you've got a TED Talk coming up about this. We're all going to be excited to read that and so excited to see what happens next for your season and with Athletes Unlimited. So thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thank you. This has been an awesome event. I'm super excited about it. And I hope all the athletes listening are getting little pieces they can take back and then implement in their day-to-day lives.
Absolutely. What can we do, right? So much surface area. So thank you so much. We unfortunately do not have Demario Davis, who was not able to join us last minute, but we do have Chase Griffin. So I'm so excited that I get to interview Chase for just a little bit, fresh off of practice at UCLA, where he is the quarterback. But just Chase, you are such a model of engaged leadership and engaged athletics. I just am so excited to welcome you to our conversation. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you everyone for being here.
Oh my gosh. Well, Chase, I want to talk about what you're doing now, but I want to go back a couple of years. 2020, you got very involved with the Bruins Votes campaign. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so during 2020, especially during the lockdown and after the murder of George Floyd, there was a lot of civil unrest. And one of the questions that myself and a lot of the guys on the team in the UCLA community asked ourselves is, what can we do to address this? And voting is one of the most important civic duties that we have, and one of the most important ways for us to make change. And as someone who is a Black American who also chose UCLA to go to, figures like Jackie Robinson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, et cetera, all set the stage for social progress that led to us having the right to vote. So to me, it was both the plan of action to address the civil unrest, and it was also walking in my lineage and in my right as who I am as a Bruin.
I love that. Again, as a futurist, we can look to the history for values that we want to bring forward in new ways. And you do that. And I know you've written op-eds about trying to really further a new narrative of what's possible, using your voice, using your gifts to inspire others in extraordinary ways. And I want to ask a quick question about something that actually Coach VanDerveer talked about earlier around NIL really as a force for good. So I want to say, first of all, congratulations. This summer, you were named Male Athlete of the Year, the inaugural NIL award, so well deserved. And I wonder if you could just share a little bit about your philosophy towards NIL and how you really embody your values in the choices that you make.
Right. I mean, you mentioned values. For me, in my process in NIL and just life in general, I try to stay true to values. And I consider myself to be a believer, a winner, and a provider. And going back to my faith as a Christian and someone who believes in using what I have to serve others, I grew up serving at the Round Rock Serving Center, which is just outside of Austin, where I grew up. And I saw how many people in the community were affected in a way where they relied on, this small food bank we had at the Round Rock Serving Center, where people would just give what they had. That changed lives. And to be in a place like Los Angeles that has the LA Food Bank, which moves literally billions and billions of pounds of food every single year, to be able to contribute a small piece to that from the platform I was building with my NIL, I considered it a huge blessing and a great opportunity to give.
It's so inspiring. A big theme of tonight, Chase, has been optimism, right? Around imagining what's possible. And I know believe is just a core part of your essence, of your brand and how you show up. And I wonder if you can maybe just share a little bit about what that means to you.
Absolutely. I think belief in self, belief in others, and belief that what ought to happen in this world, the normative values that we hope to always come true and that we work towards, that those works are not in vain. That if you look 50 years ago, you look 20 years ago, there's monumental changes that have been made to get us to this point. And that's not really something that we say, all right, let's plant our flag down, let's rest here. No, that is reinforcement and encouragement that we can make another huge stride. You know, they talk about, I mean, you're at the D school, they talk about technology, how it's exponential growth. The more technology you have, the easier it is to make better technology. I think it's the same way in social impact. With each step that we unlock, that gives us a new pathway and a new trajectory. And as long as there's people like you and everyone else on this call who's viewing or participating, I definitely have great faith and great belief that with the right heart, we can continue to grow.
Okay, just got you on speed dial, Chase. Now, I don't know, you're gonna have to work that out with your practice. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for all that you do for modeling, particularly in something new like NIL, this idea that we can actually build abundance into the system. And you do that, I know you do that with not only how you give back to the LA Food Bank, but also how you lift up your fellow athletes. And that is such an incredible model. So Chase, thank you again for being here. Good luck with the rest of the season. I know you had a big opener this past weekend and we're going to be following you. So really appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
To close us out of this unbelievable evening, I am absolutely delighted to introduce my dear close colleague, Coach Joe Kennedy. Coach Joe Kennedy is not only a former Stanford athlete playing basketball at Northwestern, but following that spent some time in the Obama administration. So really got to understand what actually civic leadership is about, very close up. And as Stefan said earlier, or Dr. Rice said earlier, getting in the trenches also on a campaign. And for the last 12 years, has been a basketball coach at Holy Cross. So is really the triple threat of understanding what it means to be an engaged athlete and why it matters. So Coach Kennedy, thank you so much for being here and helping us close out this fabulous evening.
Well, Lisa, thank you so much. It's it's been an amazing evening. We've heard from some unbelievable speakers and we've heard a lot of inspiration. I want to get into a couple things that I think are important in terms of taking action. First is this, we get the question all the time, does my vote matter? And I kind of want to start with that premise and say, yes, your vote does matter. When you vote, you are going to exercise your power, and every vote builds your future. So you're playing an active role in building your future. I always think about this, elections, having been involved in a few before my coaching career, elections are like games that a lot of times they can come down to a razor thin margin. I think of the story that in 2017, there was a race in the Virginia House of Delegates, and that race came down to an actual tie between the two candidates. And Virginia law is written in such that they had to pick a name out of the hat to determine who the winner was of that race. If just one more student had voted in that race, whether it was in person, by mail, or voted early, that would have made the difference in that election. So many, many times these elections come down to razor thin margins, just like a game, just like a contest. And you never know which vote is going to be that difference. So let's look a little bit at the past scouting report on youth voters. So historically on the youth vote, participation is about 25 to 30% below other voting groups. So other voting groups are really shaping your future because they're participating at a higher rate. Let's go to 2018, which was our last midterm election. 2/3 of young people who were eligible to vote did not participate. We've heard it from a few different speakers tonight, right? Democracy is not a spectator sport. Well, those 2/3 of young people stayed in the stands. They did not get in the game and they did not participate by casting a ballot. Now, in 2020, there was some great improvements. If we look at 2020, it really is the most improved voting bloc in the country in that last big presidential race was young people. That group jumped 11%. Which was the biggest improvement of any voting group in the country. And it's also, when you look at all the different metrics, it's the fastest growing voting group in the country. So you had a big effect on that race, young voters across the country, and that opportunity to build your future, that opportunity to have an impact is only growing. Let's take a quick snapshot at where we are right now in preparing for the 2022 midterms. Recently, it was reported that half of the states in the country, youth voter registration is lower now than it was in 2018. So that means that there's a lot of young people who have not yet taken that step to try to get involved in the game. And there's a great opportunity for all of you that are on this call to become an MVP and just not get involved yourself, but help to recruit other friends of yours to register and get in the game. We know this from all the voting data out there, that the number of votes cast in the 2022 midterms by the young voting bloc will exceed the margin of victory in these elections across the country. Meaning what? Meaning that the bottom line is young voters have the power. You will be the difference in the outcome of these races. You got to register, you got to develop a voting plan, and you got to vote. That is the key. When we go to the next slide, we're going to talk about 3 really key calls to action tonight. I want you all to take away from this call, right? We've heard a lot of great inspiration. Now I want to get into a little bit of some of the nitty-gritty things you can do right now to make a difference. First, you can go to this QR code that is on your screen, courtesy of vote.org, who's a great partner, to check your voter registration status. I say check because if you registered in 2020, you might want to go, you need to go in and double check to make sure you're still registered. Nothing's happened to that. Make sure your address is accurate. There might be some other key things that you want to make sure the laws in your state haven't changed. So check your registration, even if you did register in 20 or 18. If you haven't registered, it's a great opportunity right now to go to that QR code and register to vote. The second thing is you got to develop a voting plan. Do you want to vote early? Do you want to vote by mail, right? You might want to, you live in a state, but you want to vote back home. That means you're going to have to request your ballot here in October and ultimately mail that thing back before the election. Or are you going to actually go vote on election day, November 8th? So you've got to just not check your registration status. You got to develop a plan. And then lastly, you got to go execute that plan. It's not just about getting dressed up in your jersey for the game and then not participate. No, you got to go out there and play. You got to cast your ballot. And there's a lot of different ways, especially through the resources of vote.org to help you with that. I'm going to challenge you right now with all the hundreds and hundreds of people that are on this call. I want you to text 3 of your teammates, 3 of your friends, that QR code, or to send them to vote.org's website. They do a great job going through the logistics of making sure that you can get registered to vote, develop your voting plan specific to your state, and then making sure you're casting your ballot. And the last thing, when we think about our 3 C's and our call to action here tonight, is choose a cause. Now, you already might have something you're passionate about, then get involved. Do more on your campus, do more in your community. If you came into the call not really sure about what you might be passionate about, hopefully one of these unbelievable speakers tonight maybe inspired you to choose a cause and get more involved. And I wrote it down during the conversation tonight with Stephen Curry. He said, hey, a little bit of action matters. And I think that is so true. Choose your cause, whatever you're passionate about, get involved. And just that little bit of action, helping one person, can make a huge difference.
Amazing, Coach Kenny. Thank you so much. I just want, like, can you imagine, like, you've done everything you can do to get ready for a game, and it's tied, and it gets like decided by a flip of a coin because somebody didn't suit up and get in the game. I mean, that story that you told about Virginia, and you're absolutely right that so many student athletes ask themselves, and so many young people ask themselves, does my vote matter? That's, I think, the thing that I hear most. And the second thing I hear is, I don't think I know enough. And the great news is that there are unbelievable resources like vote.org and at All Vote No Play. We have so many resources helping you become not only engaged, but informed. And it starts with a conversation. It starts with saying, hey, you know what? This matters to me. So it's something that we can all do. We have had such an unbelievable event. And I just want to end by thanking everybody, thanking all of the participants, all of the watch parties, the Dartmouth SAC watch party, the watch party at ASU Sun Devils, all around the country. That hopefully you've been having pizza, you've been talking about the things that you can do, how you can make a difference, and put everything that our speakers talked about, the optimism, starting with the first step, that making the commitment to actually do something different, to believe that the future can be better because of what we do today. That is what this is all about. And that you all can use your power, your platform, your civic agency for good. And it starts with being a good teammate. It starts with thinking about your community as an extension of what you do every day in your sport. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you to our partners. We are just getting started. There are so many exciting things ahead. And thank you, of course, to the incredible pizzerias that have been feeding democracy throughout this evening. And of course, thank you to the incredible speakers that joined us tonight, the All-Stars, the student athletes, everyone that worked tirelessly to put this groundbreaking event together. So thank you so much. You're going to hear more from us. Look to social. We've got more goodies coming your way. I know Demario Davis has a video that he has created for us, and we are excited to amplify all of your pizza parties that hopefully you've posted. Let the civic joy begin. All right, we'll see you soon. Thank you again.